Nothing Personal starts in 30 seconds. It's just business. This is Nothing Personal.
Here you go.
Trajectory. That's the Nothing Personal word of the day for this Monday, January 6th, 2025. We're back. Thank you for staying with us for 2 weeks. Hope you enjoy the sit-downs. Heard from so many of you. It was great. Coca got a little break. Sarah got a little break. No break for you all. And we're getting back into it. We have about 200 minutes worth of things, but we're going to get it done in 50. So thank you for your time. And we're starting right now. Right off the bat, the NFL season came to a close yesterday. The NFL season to me is always interesting because week one seems like yesterday, and it's been 18 weeks. And what have we learned? We've learned that some owners have more patience than others. We've learned that some owners are more honest than others. And we learned that Robert Kraft is not happy with the trajectory of the New England Patriots. And he acknowledged it's not from game one where they won opening day. Maybe he wasn't happy with the trajectory of yesterday's game where they blew the right to have the first overall pick. When Jerod Mayo did his best Lovie Smith imitation, win a game, lose the top pick, get canned. Can't be a great plan when you're planning for the game, getting your players together, getting them all psyched up. You're coaching for your coaching life, though you shouldn't be. He's been around for a year, but apparently that's a thing in the NFL now. 1 year is what you have, and that's it. This is the 4th year in a row that there have been coaches fired after 1 year. Go back to Urban Meyer. Remember him? David Culley with the Texans as well. Lovie Smith, Frank Reich, Jerod Mayo. It's not like firing a manager. I think it's perfectly fine to fire a manager after a year. Heck, I've done that plenty of times. It's fine. You bring in another manager, give him the lineup instead of the other guy, get some players, throw out the ball, and start playing. Football, you've got systems, you've got plays, you've got an entire way of being. When you interview for a football coach and you hire that football coach, in theory, you can't be doing it on a 1-year look. And what Robert Kraft said struck me because he released right after the season this super, super long statement. And without reading the whole thing, which you can read on your own, suffice it to say that he didn't wait for Monday to fire his coach. He went right in there after the game and just said, hey, you won't be returning. We're relieving you of your duties. He then called it the hardest decision I've ever made. I don't love the hyperbole when firing people. I don't love ending the statement with, hey, we love him. We love his family. We hope his family does well. We wish him and his family nothing but the best and nothing but success. He's going to be a head coach in this league. Well, he already was. I don't know why you need all that. When you go in and fire a coach, you walk in the door, you walk in the office, and you say, we're going to go a different direction. Thank you so much. You release a statement. We have terminated Jerod Mayo. We will be undergoing a search immediately. Once the Jets fill in their GM, we're going to hire that same company. Speaking of which, Coca, can you believe that ridiculous company hired by the Jets? I'm glad they were able to identify Louis Riddick and Rex Ryan for the open positions because that is some serious value added. So the Patriots are in this position where their fan base is unhappy. Bill Belichick is with North Carolina. Tom Brady is with Fox for now. Moved on to the Raiders. And there's Robert Kraft. And I was thinking watching him during the game yesterday during the day. I watched highlights. I was in transit the entire day. I watch him. He sits in the same place. He sits with his son, Jonathan, excuse me. Stephen is Jerry's son. And I could just see him seething. That's the picture that when they went to him that I noticed. It is so hard for an owner to think to himself that he actually has no control over how good the team is. And this manifested itself across football yesterday. You had Jim Irsay come out and say, hey, we're keeping our GM and coach because I did a thorough review and they're our best. You had Stephen Ross do the same thing. What you're really supposed to do as an owner is you're supposed to look and you're supposed to decide when you look at your team, and especially in a salary cap sport, you look at the allocation, you look at what your GM does, you look at the decisions made, you know in your heart whether you've made the decisions or whether you've let the football people make the decisions. And then you decide, is it for the fans? You decide, is it for yourself? And the funny part is when owners decide to make changes like this after a season, or they decide not to make changes, I don't think it's ever for themselves. I think there's so much PR involved. There's so much stress and tension on social media that it causes. Why should a coach have to read, hey, you're coming back? Well, I have a contract. Why should an owner feel the need to release a statement? Just doesn't make much sense to me. The happiest person right now has got to be Mike Vrabel. Remember, he lost the power struggle with the Titans to a GM who then got fired. Well, he now is in position to write his own ticket to take over control of a franchise. He will be named a head coach during this cycle. I promise you that. The question is, could it be the Cowboys? Could it be the Bears? Mike McCarthy hasn't been fired yet. It can't be the new year without giving Jerry Jones some love. On January 6th of 2025, I want you all to agree with me that Jerry Jones is the single coolest guy you will ever come across. I don't mean because of his guest starring role or his cameo in Landman. I mean because he has the guts to come out and tell you what's what and who's who. Jerry Jones actually answered the question when asked whether he would fire himself as GM, because remember, he's the owner and the GM. I know you know that from watching Nothing Personal. For those of you new to the show, Jerry Jones is fodder for our show because he says some funny things. But what he said yesterday after the season was a chef's kiss. Asked whether he would continue as GM, he said, I didn't buy this team for my kids. I bought it for myself. I didn't buy an investment. I bought an occupation. I bought something I was going to do for the rest of my life, and that's what I'm doing. Hell yeah. You're the owner. It's your team. I have way more respect for you. I think that you're a terrible GM. You've done nothing. You've hurt your team, no doubt, because you're not a football guy, even though, in fact, you need a football guy and you think you're a football guy. And you know that no GM would survive without any sort of conference championship appearance in the last 29 years. Think about that math. The Cowboys were last in the conference championship in 1995. Jerry Jones, the owner, had a meeting with Jerry Jones, the GM, and said, you got this, man. You're doing great. No, it's a different kind of meeting. Jerry Jones, the owner, looked at Jerry Jones, the GM, and said, you've got better job security than a fly swatter in a room full of corpses. Because no matter what happens, you're never going to fire yourself. And so he had two choices. He could hide from that or embrace it. And boy, did Jerry Jones embrace it. I wonder whether fans of the Cowboys or fans of the Dolphins or fans of the Colts, I guess one fan of the Colts is unhappy. Do you think that Jim Irsay gives a flying rat's pituitary gland about Pat McAfee and how upset Pat McAfee is, how finished he is with the Colts, how upset he is with the way the organization is run? Think Jim Irsay spends 1 second thinking about that? No matter how powerful you think Pat may be, I can tell you that as an owner or a president, you may think about a member of the media only in what you'll do to freeze them out, only in what you'll do to make their life miserable, only in what you'll do as sport not to cooperate with them. Only what you'll do, retribution, but you certainly don't care. You're not going to change your point of view because of what someone in the media, even Pat McAfee, says. This is the time of year when you wonder to yourself, all right, we don't have a meaningful game again until September. I guess we have some time to get better. Maybe the draft will do it. So we head into wild card weekend. The wild card matchups are up. We'll talk about them toward the end of the week. It is the best weekend of football next weekend, no question, with a 2-3-1 format, 2 games Saturday, 3 Sunday, 1 Monday. Lest you think that the NFL doesn't want to own more days, more weekends. Interesting matchups. There's some road favorites, which isn't very common. The Minnesota Vikings have to go on the road into Los Angeles as favorites because they laid a complete egg last night. I don't know if you saw this story. The Minnesota Vikings purchased 1,900 tickets right behind the Minnesota bench. The game was played in Detroit, and the organization bought them on the secondary market. They spent a couple mil. Teams throw around millions like it's nothing. I don't understand how that happens. And I don't want to start the new year being anti-player or anti-incentives or anti-fan. But man, how can I not be pro-business? The way some of these players were gifted their incentives, the way the Vikings thought it would be better for their team, better for the morale, better for the bench if you papered it with Vikings fans. I actually think the Wilfs who own the Vikings, they're good people. I've dealt with them from a charitable standpoint. They're mensches. They bought these tickets, spent a couple million, and then resold them to stakeholders, resold them to corporate sponsors and ticket holders and Minnesotans who wanted to make the trek to Detroit, and sold them at a loss. And then they got their ass completely kicked, as though that was going to make a difference, as though the players come out and they're facing Detroit and that unbelievable defense. They line up, they look over across their bench, they see a bunch of people in purple, and they say, "We got you. We're doing this for you." But I can picture the meeting with the marketing people and the meeting with the owner, where the owner says, "Oh, I'm going to do this. Hurry up, get on StubHub, buy 2,000 tickets. I don't care the price." I did something this break, Coca. You know I love doing this when I travel. I love talking sports with people. Now, in Japan, first of all, I got a few things about the trip. Number one, Shohei Ohtani's face is everywhere. Remember, he deferred 68 out of his $70 million because he has so much money in endorsements. So he makes $2 million a year from the Dodgers, and he makes 60 plus from endorsements. Well, he's everywhere, literally everywhere. But I spent some time talking about some of these stories. Sat at a bar. There's some fascinating places in Tokyo to go to. Got sick in Indonesia. Bali's a beautiful place, but Bali belly got me. Still has me right now. So if I have to leave this live show, I'm sorry in advance. I always talk about names. I drop names. It's always fun to me. I keep track of hats. 1 Diamondback hat, not because Corbin Burns signed there. 0 Mets hats. It was split. 25 Dodger hats and about 22 Yankee hats. Baseball is a thing in Asia, not in Indonesia at all. And I just want to point out what New Year's Eve was like, because I want to teach you something that I didn't know. We're in a hotel in Kyoto. Quick story here, Coco. I'm sorry, on a Monday, we have so much to cover, but a quick story. We're in a hotel in Kyoto, and we say to them, "Hey, is there a party for New Year's Eve? It's New Year's Eve." And they said, "Well, no." "Well, is there a special dinner? Is there a band? Are there fireworks?" "No." About 2 hours later, at 4 o'clock, we got something under the door that was an unbelievably well-written full paragraph, because the concierge, and they put the S in service, they found one party in Kyoto where there was 1 ticket available where you can get a drink, and that it's likely to go till midnight, but not guaranteed. So I was very surprised at this because New Year's Eve is supposed to be festive. I'm not a New Year's Eve guy. Am I the only one who goes to bed at 12:01? Just to say that I stayed up randomly. Not big into New Year's Eve. As you know, I don't like anything that shows the passage of time. Birthdays, New Year's, just not into it. I don't need a reminder about the back nine. And we were told that if we want to do something for New Year's Eve, we should go to a temple in Kyoto. And so we walked to a temple, and there were hundreds of people there online because the way New Year's Eve is celebrated is that it's on a monastery, a bunch of monks in a temple. They ring a bell. And I don't mean like a dinner bell. I don't mean a cowbell. I mean like the biggest bell you've ever seen. And they have a big piece of bamboo, and they shove the bamboo onto the bell. It rings, and then people line up for hours to ring their own bell, to ring the bell as a way to ring in the new year. To which I assume that's where the expression came from. It turns out that it doesn't, but I assumed it did. So 12 o'clock comes a.m., and it is crickets. People are online, silent. The monks, silent. All you hear is the ringing of the bell. After midnight, it's not that there's a cheer, there's not a kiss, there's not a hug, there's not a firework, nothing. Silently continue online to ring the bell. Just another amazing example of the culture of Japan, which is one of the most interesting cultures I've ever been associated with. And if you think you know or can understand the culture, it's really hard. It's hard to understand the practices. It's hard to understand other than it's a level of respect that is shown between people. There's no garbage cans in Japan. You bring your garbage home with you. It's clean. There's no touching. It's a Howie Mandel dream. There's bowing. I had a wonderful, wonderful time. And I wanted to just pass this along to you as a Happy New Year because the thought, and I asked someone this, what do you think about New Year's Eve at Times Square? That got lost in translation. The thought of standing like a sardine in an area, waiting a couple of hours for a ball to drop, and then getting as hammered as you possibly can, stumbling home and starting January 1st completely hungover as though it's another excuse to possibly mark the passage of time. We just don't get it. They do get it in Japan. You know what else doesn't happen in Japan? I don't see a lot of domestic terrorism. I want to tell you how I engaged with what happened in the Sugar Bowl. I got a notification. I had terrible sleeping habits for the last couple weeks that continued to manifest themselves last night, first night back. Could have used the buffer day, Coca. And I got an alert that there had been some sort of mass casualty event on Bourbon Street. And I knew that this was the day before, the night before the Sugar Bowl. And I knew that the Super Bowl was coming, in just over a month. And my brain went to a very weird place. My brain immediately went to, now, of course, it went to the families of the people who died. It went to trying to understand how this happens, why this happens, who did it. There was no indication of who it was right in the beginning. And after I had that as a thought, I went right to the logistics of what was happening and what was going to happen with the Sugar Bowl and what was going to happen with the NFL. Because as sure as I'm sitting here on a Monday morning in January, the NFL had a meeting the day of the tragedy, the day of the terror attack, as they needed to get comfort in the security plan for the Super Bowl. The Sugar Bowl people were having meetings immediately about what to do, and they ended up postponing the Sugar Bowl by a day. With hurricanes in Florida, we would postpone events because there were resources being used. But in this case, I don't know that there were resources being used. There was no manhunt. The man had been killed in a firefight after he had committed these terrorist acts. There was a feeling that you couldn't just go on with the game, but maybe a one-day delay would somehow make things better. I'm not sure I understand the theory there. I'm not sure I understand the thought process. It's giving distance between the event and the event. and somehow 21 hours, because the game was moved up to 4 o'clock, somehow that was the number that they decided upon. The reality is that the logistics of the teams who were there, of the fans who had traveled there, of hotel openings, of people having to extend their hotel stays, what it would mean for the two fan bases, these are the things that they had to discuss. Once the initial "is everyone safe" discussion happens, then it's what do we do? What is the right chord that we will strike? So I have a suggestion to people when you're having these meetings, having had them right after 9/11, having had them with hurricanes. So many times I've sat with deaths of players. Come to think of it, I have these types of meetings so often in my career, sitting down and thinking about the butterfly effect of any decision you make, trying to write down the ramification of any decision you make, delay, postpone, further, cancel, go off on time. You go through and you actually take note of who would be negatively impacted by each decision. And you basically try to do the lesser of all of the bad decisions. You take the time to try to figure out what will impact the fewest people without making us look bad. And do you think it worked with the Sugar Bowl? I do. The game was played the next day. Life goes on. I was thinking about the Jewish religion. One of the strange things about being Jewish is how it works when there's tragedy. So the example I was talking to Coke about before the show is that you're scheduled to get married on a Wednesday, and your mother, or not your mother, but it's a horrible thing to say, but there's a death in your family on a Tuesday. The wedding goes on. If there is a terrible accident, I was thinking about Coca. This is such Monday brain. The hockey player, and his brother who got killed. I can't remember where they were, but it was very recent. It was the Goudreau brothers. And the question was, how do you deal with that? So for the Sugar Bowl, when you have a terrorist event that took place and it wasn't a hit and run, it wasn't a drunk driving situation, it wasn't an accident taking a selfie in New Orleans, it was a straight terrorist attack. You have to figure out whether or not there is a clear and present threat, and you meet with authorities immediately, and the authorities give you the go ahead that the threat is now clear. Then you get to go on to the next step, which is okay, we can guarantee the safety of our fans, we can guarantee the safety of our players. Now let's talk about what feels right. And this is where, when it comes to terrorist attacks, that I get a little dicey, because I don't know how we can ever guarantee the safety of our fans or our players. We do active shooter drills. We do terrorist attack drills. We do all of these things with our stadium operations department, with the police who are on the inside of the ballpark, the police on the outside of the ballpark, with our ushers, with everyone except the popcorn man. And the reason we do it is that we need to be able to say to you, we need to be able to say in a lawsuit that we have prepared, that we have, to the best of our ability, followed the protocols as laid out by this authority, and therefore we have no culpability. What more could we have done? So that informs what your checklist is. And it never occurred to me when I was going through these things that maybe my checklist should be more human, or more, how does it feel to families? How does it feel to victims' families? How does it feel to general people who are just scared out of their minds? I have an idea as it relates to the Super Bowl, and this is going to happen now in New Orleans. There will be bollards put up and ballards put up. Is it Greg Ballard or Ballard? Did I just drop a Greg Ballard on episode 1192 when I haven't mentioned his name one time? Coca, help me, please. I'm having a little bit of brain here. Is it a bollard, a barrier that you can't drive past? I can't think of the word right now. I'm sorry. Hi, I'm David. So for the Sugar Bowl in New Orleans, the game went on. The Super Bowl is going to go on. The security is going to be out of this world. And do you think that there's something that they could have done differently? Maybe use the sidewalk L-shaped gizmos that the police chief didn't even know they had. Maybe if they had the regular concrete barriers up on Bourbon Street. But don't you think that if people want to commit such heinous terrorist acts, they just would do it somewhere else? Different part of New Orleans? You want to wreak havoc on something. You want to commit one of these horrific acts. I'm more convinced than ever that there's nothing we can do. We just do it for PR. We just protect ourselves from bad PR. That is a tough epiphany to have when you are charged with people's safety. The NFL will have more security meetings as they head into February 9th. What they do is they have a committee. There's a security committee. We had this for the World Series. You have it for the All-Star Game, World Baseball Classic. You've got a security committee. You've got your head of security. You've got baseball's head of security. You meet with the local authorities, the state authorities, the county authorities. You come up with all your plans. You have a written document this thick. It's like 2 inches thick of all the different steps you're going to take and what you're going to do when something happens, if something happens. And all I kept thinking is it's absolute horse hockey, because you look at what happened in New Orleans and what would I have done differently running the Sugar Bowl? What would I do differently running the NFL? You just got to pretend you're prepared. All right, I want to talk about what happened in Oakland. It's been 2 weeks since we did a live show, and there was major news that happened with the Oakland A's during the break. We're going to take a quick break. We're going to review the Golden Globes, which I'm going to help you because I don't think any of you watched, but I did. So I'm going to give you a little recap of that and then talk about the Oakland A's. So if you're interested, stop that, Coca. All right, ready? 4869. If you're interested in the Aths, I've got something that happened with the organization during the break that may have escaped your attention, and it is a fascinating one, and we'll talk about it when we're back. Welcome back to a clumsy Monday, January 6th. You're out of practice listening to live shows. We're out of practice doing the live shows. It's amazing what a routine my brain gets into when we're doing it. So I'm stumbling and bumbling and mumbling while Clive Frazier. But here we go. I watched so many movies during this break, so much content, shows, etc. But today we're going to review the Golden Globes because the Golden Globes were last night. And I want to give you a few movies that I haven't seen that you have to go see immediately, starting with The Brutalist. The Brutalist had a fantastic run last night. Adrian Brody won Best Actor for a drama. The Brutalist won Best Director. It won Best Picture. That's one you got to make sure you see. Emilia Perez, we reviewed it on Nothing Personal. Make sure you go see that. It was fantastic watching Zoe Saldana. Coca, you never responded to my text when Zoe won that award. What a job she did for Best Supporting Actress. A movie worth seeing, which we've reviewed. The thing about the Golden Globes last night is it put the B in boring. Nikki Glazer was the host, and she's the host with the roast. She's the one who can roast people like crazy, and she went down the middle. She was the anti-Ricky Gervais. She didn't insult anyone. When you see it on YouTube, I don't even think, why would anyone watch the monologue? And it didn't seem like anybody was necessarily hammered, which is what happens during the Golden Globes because they're serving you drinks. It's always funny to watch people make their way to the stage when they were sitting in a Kvelt, having to navigate for 3 minutes. But this time they had a DJ narrator who would spend the time giving you little factoids while people were finding their way to the stage. Baby Reindeer was a big winner. We reviewed that. Make sure you watch it. It's an exciting year for movies. Very exciting. We will be reviewing other Oscar candidates. The nominations are coming out just in a couple weeks. And I admit it, I'm an award show geek. If you were watching the Minnesota-Detroit game, why? It was over. Could Sam Darnold have been worse? All right, let's talk about Dave Kaval. I'm going to sit up straight right now. If you're watching this on the Nothing Personal with David Samson YouTube channel, Trying to look not as ghastly as I feel. Jet lag. Yes, sir. It's something. Staring at the ceiling at 2 a.m. That's a Tuesday for me, so I don't really have jet lag. All right. We're going to count ourselves in for a separate Oakland 8 again. Darn it. We're going to count ourselves in for a separate Aths segment. 4, 8, 6, 9. Can you believe that Dave Kaval resigned as president of the Aths? Dave Kaval, the face of trying to get a new ballpark in Oakland, failed. The face of the relocation to Vegas, questionable. The face of the interim move to Sacramento, definite, since they're playing in Sacramento next season, which starts in just 2 months. We're 2 months away from the opening in Tokyo with the Dodgers and the Cubs. A little over 2 months. Dave Kaval resigned and released a statement that I almost did a live show during the break. He said that I will be staying in California to explore new opportunities at the crossroads of business and government. Where is that on the drop-down menu of LinkedIn? I'm just wondering how that works. Don't you see what actually happened here? And it happens to all of us who get new stadiums. A shout out to Larry Lucchino, an amazing mentor. If you don't know who that is, Google him. Just an unbelievably accomplished man. Rest in peace. He told me you can't get a ballpark and survive with your reputation intact. You have to be the sacrificial lamb in order to get public financing because no one's in favor of giving any sort of corporate welfare to perceived billionaires. And you have to be willing to do your job, take one for the team, because it is very rare that the public face of a stadium campaign can survive that. But interestingly enough, as the A's were continuing their move to Vegas, as they were getting towards Sacramento, Dave Kaval really disappeared. And it was this other Fisher guy, a limited partner named Dean, who really is the one who spoke at the meetings with the commission. So Kaval was basically removed from his job because he had lost his ability to be effective. Very frustrating as a team president to know that you are negotiating away your career. There is no one who stops being the president of a baseball team in order to explore new opportunities at the crossroads of business and government. That gobbledygook, what is he going to be, a lobbyist? Is that the crossroads of business and government? Are you going to be some sort of entrepreneur? I think that if you are going to resign as team president, effective December 31st, as your team is getting ready at the interim facility, then your commitment to your organization is non-existent. It has to be that he was fired. It has to be that John Fisher realized that he had burnt Kaval the way you burn a knock list in Mission Impossible. He had to have recognized that leading that organization through Sacramento to Vegas, getting a ballpark built in Vegas was just something he was not going to be able to do. And if that's the case, why not just say it? Why not have John Fisher, instead of coming out and saying, we are grateful for Dave's contributions and leadership over the past 8 years. As we look ahead to the next chapter of our franchise, the team will continue to grow under new leadership, blah, blah, blah. How about saying that my name's John Fisher, and I'm not selling this team? There is no question that this process has been fraught with ugliness. It's been sex, lies, and videotape. It is very difficult to have any credibility in any of the 3 markets, whether it's Oakland, Sacramento, or Vegas. And in order to attempt to relaunch this team, both on an interim basis in Sacramento and a permanent basis in Vegas, should that happen, there was no choice but to have Dave Kaval no longer associated with the team. Normally, for a team president who's going to get his power usurped and not be the public face, you kick him upstairs. Could be the CEO. He can be the special assistant to the owner. He can be, it's like being of counsel when you age out of a law firm. But to go through the machinations and basically the contortions required to have you believe that everything he did was magical, to me, it made John Fisher look even worse than he already looks. This was his moment to take an aggressive step to improving his reputation. It was his moment to acknowledge the ineffectiveness of his team president. And instead, they went with the normal, innocuous, pleasant statements. The only thing missing, and I give John Fisher credit, there was nothing there about his family. To sum up the Oakland situation, you've read that the deal in Vegas is done, except they're missing an entire agreement with Clark County. You've read that they're going to break ground in the first quarter of 2025. Spoiler alert, we're in the first quarter. And breaking ground is not a ceremony with a shovel. You've read they can break ground as late as the second quarter, start construction, and still be fine for 28. I have no idea what kind of construction weed they're smoking, but it must be laced with rebar and some sort of concrete juice. Because to have a construction timeline that condensed is a prescription for overrun disaster. And in Vegas, they already have about $500 million of overruns. I'm not willing to say it's done yet. I'm going to start 2025 the way I did all of 24 and 23 and 22 and 21 and 20. I'll believe Vegas when I see it. I like what owners do. We started this show talking about football owners. We talked about Jerry Jones. I want to revisit some stuff that I love. The Jacksonville Jaguars, it's breaking news right now. I don't know when you're listening to this. If you're on DraftKings, it's 10:37. The Jaguars fired Doug Pederson after 3 seasons. They have completely ruined Trevor Lawrence's career, although I could argue it was ruined because of skill. But in any case, 4th head coach for Trevor Lawrence. Doug Pederson, the Super Bowl winning quarterback. He was under fire the entire season in Jacksonville because they were supposed to be good, the London Jaguars, and they were terrible. So the decision made by Khan, who for me is, forget the bottom quartile, he's the bottom 1 or 2 owner in terms of effectiveness in the National Football League. He rivals Jerry Jones, except Jerry's got the ring, so that puts him ahead of Khan. Somehow Khan believes that Doug Pederson was the issue, not willing to acknowledge that Trevor Lawrence is the issue. Teams double down on their quarterbacks, whether it's Tua, the Giants did with Jones, and then finally jettisoned him. The Jaguars are without a coach. They're with a GM. And Shad Khan, just this morning, he stayed up all night thinking of this one. I will collaborate with general manager and others within and close to our organization to hire a leader who shares my ambition and is ready to seize the extraordinary opportunity we will offer in Jacksonville. Coca, you know, it would be really amazing if we had a bigger budget, and remind me to talk to Meadowlark about this. What if we had the ability right now on the screen to flash through all the other times that Khan had fired his coach? And I'll bet you dollars to donuts that he basically said the same thing each time. We all say that when we're hiring someone. We're looking for a leader who shares my ambition. What does that mean? The last one you hired didn't share your ambition? You hired someone who wants to lose? It's absolutely absurd. They always like to say, hey, we're going to look for someone who's a leader of men. I like that one. The last guy we hired was a leader of children. This time we want a leader of men. The good news is I'm going to collaborate with the GM who got us in this pickle in the first place. Or did he? If you're a Jaguars fan, Let's face it. You're despondent. Doug Pederson's not your problem. Khan is. The other team that I want to bring up is the New York Giants. I didn't get a chance to talk about them earlier in the show. This is for you, Sarah. And for all the Giant fans out there, Will, Moshe, scores of you, who I know listen to the show, and I appreciate that, although Sarah gets paid too. John Mara, the owner of the Giants, he came out and said, we've got our guys. We're keeping Brian Daboll and Joe Schoen. No change. They're going the Dolphin route. He said, now that our season is over, we felt it necessary to make this statement. Why? Joe and Brian will continue in their respective roles with the organization. Why? As disappointing as the results of the season have been, Steve, Tish, and I remain confident in the process that Joe and Brian have implemented and their vision for our team. We look forward to the future and achieving the results we all desire. I like that. We're going to build, Stephen Ross said it, we are going to build a team that is sustainable, competing for championships. We told you early in the show, what do you need the statement for? John Mara was compelled to give you a statement. Why? Because everyone wants to can everybody? People want to can everybody always anyway. And now you're really screwed because if you lose the first 4 games next year because you don't get the quarterback you want because you got the 3rd overall pick, and it's possible the only 2 good quarterbacks will go pick 1 and pick 2. But I digress. Let's pretend you have a quarterback and it's not DeVito and it's not Luck or Bolt or anybody else. Not Jones. What do you do after a few games next year when the noise is even louder? Do you put out another statement? John Mara came out during the course of the season and he was very positive. I spoke to our owners so many times about this, about the dreaded vote of confidence. We would do it when we knew we were firing a manager and it just made us look bad. I don't know why you do it. If you're the Giants, aren't you thinking to yourself, what do we do? Do you trade up to try to get the first pick from the Titans? Do you try to trade up with the Browns, thinking the Browns are going to stay with Deshaun Watson and then take a young quarterback who you're going to have to play immediately on the hope and prayer that he can be a performing young quarterback? Can we talk about Miami, please? I don't talk too much about Miami. I don't talk too much about the Marlins, the fact that they haven't spent $1 in free agency. I told you that was going to happen. I told you that they're getting crushed and that the owners will not allow them to lose even more money than they're losing. Their payroll will go up naturally. They cannot allow their payroll to be higher. Ignoring the fact that Peter Bendex, you have to ignore everything he says, please. Bruce Sherman's willing to spend money. You know very well that Bruce is a smart guy. If you're the Marlins, why would you spend money? So people are despondent about the Marlins. What do you want to get from 69 wins to 69 and a half? Way to go. Let's sign another Avisail Garcia. Oh, no, we won't do that because Jeter's not in charge. But in any case, I'm not as down on the Marlins for not spending free agent money. What's the difference? Maybe their prospects are good. I'm a little down, though, on other things going on in Miami, and I want to bring up 2 of them. How dare Jimmy Butler do what he did in a post-game interview? How dare he say that there's no joy and I want joy and I can't find joy in Miami. The only joy I'll have is somewhere else. Can you find it here? Probably not. Game over. Pat Riley had said we're not trading Jimmy Butler. Jimmy Butler does nothing. Plays chess to Pat Riley's checkers, which means that Pat's lost a step because no one plays chess to Pat Riley's checkers. All Jimmy Butler does is have a meaningful, purposeful talk to the media, drop 2 sound bites, say that he's miserable, and now the Heat are shopping him. After Pat Riley said under no circumstance will we trade Jimmy Butler. Don't you forget that Jimmy Butler's tenure with the Heat is going to end exactly the way his tenure ends with every other team. And don't you dare forget what Jimmy Butler's agent said when he called out Shams, who had it totally right, it turns out. Remember that? Go back to the previous episode we did. That agent. They should all be ashamed of themselves. If I'm Pat Riley of the Heat, guess what I'm doing to you, Jimmy? You can rot. You want to pick up your player option? Do it. I'm not going to take on bad money and bad contracts and do the Nick imitation of the Patrick Ewing trade to set our franchise back 10 years so I can make you happy. I appreciate the finals appearances. I appreciate the ringless stretch that we had, however fun it was. But you think for 1 second that you're worthy of that level of empowerment? Pat Riley was willing to jettison Dwayne Wade. Pat Riley still trying to recover from LeBron choosing to go back to Cleveland and leaving Miami. You think Pat Riley has any interest in doing one thing for Jimmy Butler? Here's a news alert. They can't stand Butler. They haven't been able to stand him. And this is not irresponsible journalism, Dan. Don't play it. Go back. Go to any one of your Heat sources. And let's see if they have the guts to tell you the truth, which is the front office of the Heat couldn't stand Jimmy Butler, even when the team was doing well. Player option of $52 million that Jimmy Butler says he is going to forego so he can be a free agent to get a max deal from someone. I can't wait for a team to sign Jimmy Butler, who's completely ineffective, over the hill, plays when he wants to play, doesn't show up when he doesn't want to show up, is an absolute nightmare inside the clubhouse locker room with the front office. I can't wait. Do it. Give him the max. All Heat fans, are you really upset? Don't make Pat Riley, not that you can make Pat Riley do anything. Do not make Pat Riley make a move for the sake of making a move. Let him just sit there and stew and have no touches and let him sit on the bench. The Heat aren't going anywhere this year anyway. The bigger decision that Pat Riley has to make is whether or not he's got the pieces in place to win with who he has. And Jimmy's not even in that equation. I don't quite understand how you can allow Jimmy Butler that level of power. The Dolphins are up against it too. Did you see what Tyreek Hill said after the Dolphins game? The Dolphins were out of the playoffs the minute the Broncos were playing the Chiefs, and the Chiefs were resting everybody. The Broncos game was over 2 minutes into the game when they went up 7-0. They didn't need another point. The Dolphins ended up losing to Aaron Rodgers, who left on a positive note. 4 touchdowns. What a great bow on his Jets career. The worst decision by the Jets in their franchise history was bringing in Aaron Rodgers, thinking how sexy it would be to have him on your team. And now they wait and see whether he wants to return. I'll give you a wait to see. This isn't official, actually. I'm not ready to start the season with an official. Forget Aaron Rodgers. But back to the Dolphins. Did you see Tyreek Hill meet the media and try to use the media post-game, telling us that he's done with his Dolphins career? He's had enough, out the door. And then Mike McDaniel has to respond with, hey, we didn't play him in the fourth quarter because we had a new injury, some sort of injury. Hadn't seen that before. Tyreek Hill saying that he's not getting enough touches, he's not getting enough chances, that he doesn't want to put up with this anymore. I'm not exactly sure who he thinks he is, but if you're Chris Greer and you've now got the power bestowed in you by Stephen Ross because you're not getting fired, or you're Mike McDaniel, here's the message you send to the team. See you later, Tyreek. You want dead cap money? Fine, take it. Pay attention, NFL teams, to all of these deals you sign to get present day pleasure, and then you get totally screwed in the future with dead cap money and with all the ways that all your salary cap department heads are trying to tell you ways that you can maximize your team now to win, to keep your window open. And then if you don't win, which 31 teams don't every year, then what? Total screw job. I have no idea why Tyreek Hill did what he did, saying I'm opening the door, I'm out, bro. It was great playing here, but at the end of the day, I got to do what's best for my career. Here's what's best for your career. Do your job. I don't say that just to a player. I say it to everybody. If more people just did their job, don't you think that we'd have a country that was a bit more, little help on the GDP, a little more efficient? Everybody's worried about gossiping at the water cooler. Everybody's worried about themselves. I'm all in for being selfish. God knows I am. But it's got to come with doing your job. If the Dolphins decide that they are going to allow Tyreek Hill to dictate their next move, then you are consigning yourself to more years of losing. Just like if the Heat do the same to Jimmy Butler, you've got to hope that those front offices will not succumb to the whims and the irrational musings of players, whether it's post-game or whether it's perfectly planned out by the agent. Because at the end of the day, for every one of these teams, whether you keep your coach or not, whether you fire your coach or not, just know that you've got to worry about the macro. And so you've got to say to yourself that it's just business. Sorry, this is nothing personal.